Good morning, everybody. Just want to mention that this is our last Thursday morning. This week is the last week of the Chizuk Shiurim on Zoom. I should mention that my Thursday morning shiur at the OU Center will resume live at 10:45 next Thursday morning. Okay, so let me begin. We'll catch up in writing in a few minutes. I have three pieces that I'd like to learn with you on the Parsha that somehow will relate to our current situation, uh, that Mirz Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will take us out of very soon with the help of OUisrael. The first is the introduction to Sefer Shemot. We're starting a new Sefer of Chumash. So there's an introduction to the Pirush, the commentary of the Emek Dover of Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. And his introduction is very special. He brings a tremendous chiddush, tremendous nuance, the name of the Sefer, right? We call it Sefer Shemot, the Book of Names. That's really based upon a medrash. He says that a Sefer Nikras Hamedrash Sefer Shemot. He's referring to a medrash in Bereshis Rabbah that the medrash there says in the name of Rabbi Simon that 5 times the word or is mentioned in the creation chapter. The first or, Yehi or, is Bereshit. Vayehi or refers to Sefer Shemot. So this Bali medrash say that each mention of the word or, of light, Torah or, relates to one of the 5 Sifrei Chumash. So that's why we call it Shemot. The Ramban, Sof Sefer, Paru Sefer Geula. The Ramban calls it the book of redemption, because that's what takes place, right? Shemot is used again. We very often, Chazal very often took a primary word in the first pasuk to give it the name. But the Ramban calls it Sefer Geula, which is talking about the purpose of the chapter, the theme of the Sefer. Zulat Rabbeinu Bahag. However, the Bahag and the Baal Haglachas Gadol is another Rishon. Sof Sifra HaKodesh at the end of his Sefer. What does he call it? He calls Sefer Shemot Sefer Sheni, the second Chumash, right? The Chashiv Chamisha Chumshei Torah. There are 5 Chamisha Chumshei Torah. So he says Bereshit, Chumash Sheni, Sefer Kohanim, which is the third, which is Vayikra, the Karbonos, and Chumash HaPikudim. Sefer Dvorim he calls Chumash HaPikudim because it deals with a number of censuses that were taken of Klal Yisrael. Sefer Pikudim rather is Dvorim, and Mishnah Torah is Sefer Dvorim, which is a repetition. Many things are repeated in Sefer Dvorim from the other Sifrei Chumash, so it's called Mishnah Torah, the secondary Torah, right? And this is based on a Gemara in Sota he brings. Lo kederach shechalukim b'chumash hapikudim, ela kederach shechalukim b'chumash sheni. So it's even referred to in the Talmud as chumash sheni. And this is a problem, right? We have to understand what the rabbis meant by referring to Shemot as Sefer Sheni. In other words, if you're going to use ordinal numbers for all of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, so you can say, if you want, Sefer Bereshis, Sefer Sheni, the second Sefer, the third Sefer, the fourth Sefer, the fifth Sefer. Why is it only that Sefer Shmos is using an ordinal number for the book of the Chumash, right? So obviously, what he's going to say, the Netziv, is it's not referring to the second of the 5 Sforim. He's saying a tremendous chiddush. Shelo b'chtinam shinu Hashem b'zeh sefer. It's not for naught that he changed the name. Etc. You should use all ordinal numbers, right? O al inyan mesuyam shabo, or call the name of the sefer based upon the theme. Like, the Ramban calls it Sefer Geula, Or he says you could call it Sefer Yetziat Mitzrayim, which in fact is what we call it in English, right? The book of Exodus, which relates to the theme of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which takes place in Shmos. Or Matan Torah. The Torah is given in Shmos, so it should be called Sefer Matan Torah. Kemoshe Kori Sefer Bamidbar, we're in the desert. Sefer Pikudim, it's called Pikudim for the counts, censuses that were taken. Kemoshe Kosov, so now what's the answer to this? Tremendous chiddush. Elabo lamadnu dezeh sefer beyichud hu sheni l'sefer Bereshit. It's not the second of the 5 chumashim, it's the second Bereshit. There's Bereshit Aleph and Bereshit Beis. Sefer Bereshit is the first part of the creation of the world, but Sefer Shmos, the second Sefer, is the second Sefer of creation. So his answer is that Sefer Shemot, why the rabbis call it Sefer Sheni, is not that it's the second of the 5 Sforim Chumash. Hello? But it's the second Sefer of Bereshit. It's Bereshit 2, right? What does that mean? Hainu, Bo Nigmar Seder HaBriya. You know, the actual creation of the world was completed in Sefer Shemot. Ukamayim Ramzal, as the rabbis say, Bereshit. The rabbis darshan Bereshit. Okay, very good. If you go down about 10 lines, the rabbis call it Bereshit Bishvil Yisrael Shanikru Reshit, that it was created for the Jewish people who are called Reshit, his first. The major theme is the creation of the Jewish people, which takes place in Shemot. Pirush Toldot Ha'olam, Tachlit Ha'olam B'chlal. The purpose of the world is to create this people of Am Yisrael. Hu she'eh Uma Achat Chelik Hashem Amo. There should be one nation who is attached, you know, at the hip to the Ribono Shel Olam. V'zeh lo nishlam ad sheyatzu Yisrael miMitzrayim. And the peoplehood of Klal Yisrael did not actually take place until we came out of Mitzrayim. Am mikerev am, that it was goy mikerev goy. That it's, you know, the rabbis in the Medrash relate Yetzias Mitzrayim to kind of birthing, that we were birthed, we came out of Mitzrayim. This was the birth of the nation. The Jewish nation was created. Until we came, a slave people cannot be called a nation. They're subservient to another force. Once we came out of Mitzrayim, we became a nation. We became an independent Am Yisrael. Sheyatzu Yisrael miMitzrayim ubo tachlitam shuletzurat achera. So we're coming to flowering into our purpose of being a unique. Shekiblu aleim ol Torah mitzvot. Also, we receive the Torah in Shmos. So this is, the world is not just a physical creation. It's a physical creation, which is what we were engaged and trying to and studying in Sefer Bereshit 1, but in Bereshit 2 now, Sefer Shmos, we're now getting into the spiritual creation of the Jewish people. That we should be a light unto the nations. To bring the nations of the world to a sense of godliness, monotheism, morality, and ethics. As I've mentioned this in other places, right? And he goes on to say, in my commentary later, this is the purpose of the creation, that it was created for the honor, the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he should, Hanikra Bishmi, we would be called after him, okay? So in other words, Nimtza de Yetziat Mitzrayim haya Gemar Habriya, O Matan Torah. The completion of the created world was the exodus from Egypt or the giving of the Torah. So people think of the creation of the world in a physical sense, right? In a physical sense. I always give the example of a walnut. If you would take a walnut, and someone doesn't know what it is, so there's a walnut, so he sees the physical shell of the walnut, right? But we know there's a fruit within the walnut. right? Which is the essence. It's the nut, the fruit of the nut. Notice the rabbis teach that the world was created with 10 asora maimorim, 10 statements with which God created the world, the physical world. And with 10 plagues, he took us out of Egypt. And with 10 commandments as the basis for Taryag, he gave the Torah. What is the implication of this repetition of 10? What does it mean? A perfect 10, right? So the first 10 is the physical creation of the world. Then the makkah, so you take the walnut and you crack it, you break it open, and you see the real world, the fruit, the nut. The real purpose is the spirituality. So you have the 10 statements of the physical creation, the 10 makkos which break through to discover the 10 Aseres Hadibros, the 10 commandments, which represent the spirituality, the essential world that was created, right? God created this dual, there was a dialectic, a duality, a dual world that he created. And this required, Bereshit 2, it required Sefer Shemot. Kimavur od birabba b'parshas. So, Hainu K'de'isa b'avodas kochavim, he quotes a Gemara, Vayerev Vayivoker Yom HaShishi. All right, all the other days there was no definite article. Hashi was Chamishi, Revi, Chamishi, Shlishi. But what's Hashishi? The Hey, the five. It's a hint to the 5 forum of the Chumash that the world was created. The physical world was created for the spiritual world, the giving of the Torah. HaTorah shenikra Reshis. Torah is also called Reshis, the first. Hainu K'de'isa b'avodas kochavim. Im Maisa Bereshis. Im mekablim Yisrael as Torah mutav, if we accept the Torah, fine. Im love, ani yachzar eschem l'tov avo. The world is meaningless. There's meaningless if there's no spirituality to the world. People go through life living a life of materialism, of physicality, but they completely miss the essential purpose of the created world, which is Bereshis Beit, which is Yetziat Mitzrayim, the message of Am Yisrael, the creation of Yisrael, which is Ner Amim, and the Torah, right? Nimsa de Matan Torah hu Gemara Bria. The giving of the Torah was the completion of the created world. Hainu hachti Yetziat Mitzrayim. So also the Exodus from Egypt. Az hayu ru'uyim Yisrael lekabel haTorah. Now we were fit, to receive the Torah because we were a nation. Ula hashlim Bria, to complete the creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lavo lezeh the tachlis yitzirasam, to come to the purpose of our creation. V'das Torah etzel am Hashem, hu kemodas anushi umidat Yisrael shel Torah ha'adam. Right? This is asher al afal gav shelo higia tevel umelo lezeh hashlemus ad achar zman rav achar bria shemayim va'aretz. Even though this completion did not come till a long time after the physical creation. And he says, by the way, Gam Kayom Hazeh Harbe B'nei Adam Lo Higiu L'Zeh Ma'ala. Many people tragically live through their lives without a sense of spirituality, a sense of Ruchniut, a sense of Bereshit Beit. They live with Bereshit Aleph, the physical world, trying to improve their lot in the physical created world, the material world, but totally goes over their head the fact that that's not the essence of the world. Mikol Makom, that being said, Adavar Muskal Gam Lumat Holam, but there are many people in the world who appreciate there's a sense of morality, right? The Torah actually gave the world morality. So there are people, non-Jews amongst the nations, who appreciate that there's much more to the world than its physicality. The Ragzehu Tachlis Milas Adam, this is the purpose of man. V'kach yesh lanu am Yisrael lahamin, the Jewish people have to believe the afal gav shelo nitna haTorah v'chukotea ad achar yetziat Mitzrayim, notwithstanding the fact that the Torah was given after the Exodus from Egypt. Gam ata now yesh harbe mi Yisrael shelo higiu adat Torah. There are many Jews, Rahman al-Islam, the assimilation process, we know what we're dealing with in this world, who are totally oblivious again to the spirituality, not nations of the world, but the Goy Orth, but Jews themselves. Mikol Mokom Rak HaTorah Itachlas Mailas Yisrael Shenotra Lezeh. So essentially, the Torah is the essence of the Jewish people. So without finishing this whole piece, you see the chiddush of the Netziv is why the rabbis, Gemara and Avodah Zarah, the Baal Halachas Gedolos, Rishon, an early rabbi, refer to Sefer Shmos, not the book of Exodus, relating to the events that take place, but as Chumash Sheni, the second Chumash, not the second of five, but the second of Bereshis, Bereshis Aleph and Bereshis Beis. Bereshis Aleph being the physical creation, Bereshis Beis being Sefer Shmos, being the spiritual gift, or the essence, the heartbeat of the creation. Now, this idea, by the way, these terminology of Bereshis Aleph, Bereshis Beis, you might be familiar, and it might be reminiscent to you that you've heard that there's a very famous presentation by Rav Soloveitchik in The Lonely Man of Faith, where he speaks about Bereshis Aleph and Bereshis Beis, but he's talking about chapter 1 and chapter 2 in Sefer Bereshis. It's a totally different idea, which perhaps someday we'll get to in our Chumash Shiurim. But what Rav Soloveitchik essentially says is the first chapter of Bereshis is talking about creating things. Bereshis Beis is creating relationships, right? Even man and woman were created as an object in Bereshis Aleph, and Bereshis Beis, the relationship between husband and wife was created. So totally different discussion, but the terminology is similar. So now we're going to go to Emes Yaakov. I think that was, here we go, coming up, this next page, if we can pick it up. This is from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. Now, he also comes out here with a wonderful chiddush for us. You know, we have a tillim called Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos that we say 3 times a day on Shabbos. Friday night, we say it, and we say it in Psukei Zimra in the morning, and we say it at the end of davening. Why is it called Mizmor Shir? Why was this the psalm for the 7th day? So this is what Rabbi Yaakov is going to develop for us. We have near the end of the parsha, I think in Shvi, that Moshe and Aaron come to Paro with a proposal. Let the Jewish people go out for 3 days, right? They want to have a spiritual retreat. Right, we call it a retreat, although that's really an improper. The Catholics were the ones who developed retreats. Our Torah retreats. Some people call it Torah retreats, but really it's not a retreat. It's a forward, right? But he wanted to go for a spiritual, take the Jewish people out for offer karbonos to daven, etc. And Paro rejected them, and the pasuk says that al yishu b'divrei sheker. You see that at the beginning of the page. Al yishu b'divrei sheker. I don't want to hear, as Rashi explains, I don't want to hear about this fantasy of developing a spiritual process and environment, spiritual milieu. I'm not interested. Get to work. And because of this request, he forced them to do more. He squeezed it harder. The Egyptian bondage became more severe because of this request. He took away their Shabbos, which they had, the day of rest they had. So, but the Medrash says something entirely different, and that's what Rabbi Yaakov is going to focus on, and it's going to relate to our question about Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. The Medrash, it says, Melamed shahayu biyadam Megillos. The Medrash says that we had Megillos. We had shahayu mishta'ashim behem b'Shabbos. Mishta'ashim, from this pasuk, al yishu, so that the Medrash is suggesting that Paro is saying, don't turn to these empty books of falsehood. Because just like the word sha'ah, God turned sha'ah to the korban of Hevel, and he didn't turn to the korban of Kayin. So the word sha'ah means to turn to study these Megillas. The Medrash says that we had books, we had Megillas, we had scrolls, shayu mishtayim behem b'Shabbos, that we would study on Shabbos in Egypt. Lomar sha'Kodesh Baruch Hu go'alan, to tell us that God is going to redeem us. Remember, we were resting on Shabbos. Amar le'em Paro techabed ha'avoda ala noshim v'yasubo v'lo yishu. Now Paro takes away Shabbos and he increases the work, lo yishu, that we shouldn't turn to these forum. That's really how the Medrash understands it. Elayu mishtoyim, elayu nafishim b'yom Shabbos. They shouldn't be at rest anymore on Shabbos. Hine, lo matzinu b'shum makom ma hayu megillos elu Uma Allah b'sofan v'Allah b'da. So we don't find any source. What exactly were the texts, the Megillas that OUisrael studied in Mitzrayim, where that Moshe was presenting to us to strengthen our belief under Egyptian bondage, under the avodah of Mitzrayim. V'Allah b'dati, and I want to suggest the Hinei. Im nidayek b'mizmor shir Yom HaShabbos. Take a look at Mizmor shir Yom HaShabbos. Tilim 92, Tzadi Beis. Nira shalom nimtza sham shum zeichel Yom HaShabbos. There's no mention of Shabbos there. Why is it called a psalm for Shabbos? It doesn't mention Shabbos. V'adarabba. The Sof HaMizmor, at the end of the Mizmor, bir lanu, what is explained in the Tehillim, shetachlis kavonas hamizmar. The purpose of the mizmar is hula hagid ki yashar Hashem tzuri. God is straight. He's velo avlosabo. He's not gonna. Just don't despair. God is upright. He's straight. No matter, we're going through a period of suffering now, but this is not the end. This is not the end game. Very much in sync with what we're going through right now. V'hainu achar sheparo he schemed lebakashato shel Moshe sheyitain liYisrael yom menucha. After God acquiesced, Kodesh Baruch Hu acquiesced to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to Moshe Rabbeinu, and gave us a day of rest. Ubachar lo Moshe as Yom HaShabbos, and Moshe chose Shabbos as the day. Sider Moshe sheyit asu b'nei Yisrael v'yishtashu b'megilloseim. He arranged for us to learn on Shabbos. Aval achar sheba Moshe leparo sheyishlach es b'nei Yisrael, but after he came and made that request to leave for 3 days, kazar aleim sheyasu avodatam gam b'Shabbos. We're going to have to work on Shabbos also. Kedei shelo yuchlu lihishtashem b'megilloseim. So we could not to disallow us from studying these texts. In another chapter, I explained Shatam Zelo. You could perhaps suggest this is one of the reasons when he took away Shabbos from us, that this might be one of the explanations for the pasuk that says Efshar mitam zeh lo shamu el Moshe mikotze ruach, that the Jewish people Bnei Israel didn't listen to him because of shortness of spirit, because he took away the Shabbos. Now, what does this have to do with Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos? After a little bit of study here, nearly I want to make the following suggestion, and it's very creative. Demikevan she matzinu she Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos Moshe Rabbeinu Amru. Contrary to what one might think, the Sefer Tehillim was not written only by David Melech Yisrael. There were a number of chapters of Tehillim that were actually written by Moshe Rabbeinu himself. In fact, he writes, based on a Rashi in Maseches Bava Basra, it's in the Talmud, Daf Yud Daled, Tefillah LeMoshe, the Tefillah LeMoshe, the capital Tehillim starts Tefillah LeMoshe, which we also say on Shabbos, which is Tehillim Tzadi, 90, V'kol Yud Aleph Mizmorim Kesidron, and all the 11 Tehillim after that, in continuum, Kesidram, he Adkan Lashon Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu created. He was the author of these Mizmorim that David HaMelech incorporated into Sefer Tehillim. Im Ken Yesh Lomar, one of these Mizmorim is, as we said, 92 Tzadi Beis is Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos. So Im Ken Yesh Lomar, I want to suggest Shemizmor Zeh Haya Echad Mehamegillos Hadan Be'inyan Shel Rosha V'Tovlo. What is the theme of Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos? The theme is, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Which is really how he had to strengthen the Jewish people. OUisrael had to have that resolve, being in Egyptian slavery, right? This was This was the need of the hour. L'chein achar shekiblu Yisrael miparo as Hashabbos Yom Menucha, when the Jewish people received from Paro Shabbos as a day of rest. Hine nitzayirna. He says, think about it. Na la hitzayirna la'atzmeinu. Think about it. Ma yu osim achinu hamudachim Yom Menucha. What did the Jewish people do? What did OUisrael do? What did Bnei Yisrael do on Shabbos? Kimuvan. Shayu holchin al hayeshiva. They went to the yeshiva. Shelo paska me'avotenu. The yeshiva never stopped in the Masorah of the Jewish people. In fact, Levi was the Rosh Yeshiva in Egypt, right? So what did they do? They went to the yeshiva. And there were drushes that were given from Levi, from Moshe Rabbeinu. They were learning. What were they studying? Mitzayirna. Think about it. Ma haita ikra drasha. What was the emphasis of the drasha, right? The Avos, Moshe Rabbeinu, is going to focus on the need of the hour. Kimuvan, clearly lo'odeid et rucham, to lift up, elevate their spirit. V'shelo yikashu kushazu shel tzadik v'ralo. They should not dwell on this question of tzadik v'ralo, why good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. I just want to point out, incidentally, some of you might have heard of the Piasetzner Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh, who was a great rabbi in the Warsaw Ghetto, and his Sforim were saved. He they were buried in the cemetery in Warsaw, and they were discovered, and eventually came to Eretz Yisrael. And we are beneficiary of the great Sforim of the Piasetzner Rebbe. And if you see his drushes for 2 years, the sermons, the drushes that he gave on Shabbos in the Warsaw Ghetto, really were this kind of a theme, focusing on where we're at now, that we have to strengthen ourselves and focus on what, not to ask the question of why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do this, but what can we do now to bring about a change? What the Ribbono Shel Olam does, we can't fully understand, right? It's an uncommon denominator, but we can understand what we are capable of doing to change the situation, right? Again, dovetails to our moment in Jewish history right now. So this is what was going on here with Kolomar, Afilu B'shas Tokif Hagolos Shudom L'Laila. So I left a line, I think it says Shalo Yikash. They shouldn't. Ulazeh Tikin Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, Moshe established Mizmor Zeh L'Yom HaShabbos. So he wrote this Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. This is the psalm for the Shabbos day that we're going to learn on Shabbos to strengthen our resolve. V'hainu lahagid baboker chazdecha ve'munascha balelos. We offer our Laila. We see his chesed in the day. When things are going good, we see the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'munascha balelos, but Laila, the darkness of night, Golos, Laila, Kolomar, Afilu, B'shat Tokev Hagalut, Shudom L'Laila, even in the darkness of night, where we can't really understand that there is good and bad. But we have to strengthen our resolve to understand that there really is good and bad, and somehow things are going to change. V'afal pikein aleinu lomar ma gadlu ma'asecha Hashem. How great are the creations of the world. Mo'ad amku machshavosecha. And if you go through the words, I'm not going to go through the rest of this piece, but he goes through to show that that's the theme of Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos is Tzadik V'Ralo Rasha V'Tovlo. You see the Egyptians who are on top, and OUIsrael, the Tzaddikim, are on the bottom. How can we justify this? So he changes the focus. He broadens it. This is a temporary situation, and that was the focus of Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, and that is why it's called Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Okay, I want to go to the last piece, and this is from Rav Hutner. Actually, I've taken this from the Sefer Kanfei Yonah. This happens to be my Sefer on the Parsha in Ivrit, Kanfei Yonah, which is, in English, the Sefer is called In the Dove Found Rest. But this is Kanfei Yonah's, and I bring in here a beautiful piece from Rav Hutner, and he asks a very simple question. The Pasuk says at the beginning of Shemot, Vayamat Yosef v'chol echav, and Yosef died and all his brothers. V'chol adorahu, and the entire generation. So we're now going into we're going from Bereshis to Shmos, right? So Hagon Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner Amad al Kach, he asked the question, Shel Yosef, that Shemitato Shel Yosef, Uskara Pam Nosefet, Besof Chumash Bereshit. Yosef's death was recorded at the end of Sefer Bereshis. Madua yeshno tzorach lachzor ha'amayim al oto irua, right? In other words, you have an obituary once, but twice, a person dies once. So how do we understand that the Torah talks about Yosef's death twice and in two different places, in Sefer Bereshis and in Sefer Shmos? What is the lesson that we learn from this? The Torah is not repeating things for nothing, right? There's no such thing. There has to be a reason why the death of Yosef is mentioned in both forms. So he bases it on an understanding of the Ramban, a little different approach than we had at the beginning from the Netziv. Shelazumi Yushav agreed. Rav Hutner answers this al pi dvorav shel Ramban. The Ramban higdir Sefer Bereshis Sefer Avot. The Ramban refers to Sefer Bereshis as the book of our forefathers, right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Those are the personalities at play in Sefer Bereshis. It's Sefer Avot. Vet Sefer Shemot, the Sefer Habonim. This is the Sefer of the children, the Shvatim, the next generation, OUisrael, right? Heichan Mekomo Shel Yosef B'toch Chalukazu. Where does Yosef fit in exactly in these two ideas? Is he an Av or is he a Ben? Mitzad Echad, on the one hand, the Gemara Brachas, the Gemara in Brachas says, Mevor she'ein korin avot, ella l'shlosha, that there's only three avot, right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. One of the trick questions that you ask a child in the first or second grade, how many forefathers do we have, right? So, avot, ein avot, ela shlosha. There are only three avot. Umikan, sheYosef nechshav kechelek midor habanim. Therefore, you have to say that really Yosef was a ben, right? Sefer Shemot, not Sefer Bereshit, right? Me'idich, but on the other side of the coin, Yosef eno yachol lamod b'shura achat im sharachim. He was above the rest of the banim. He was on a different level, an uncommon denominator with his brothers. Kemo Yaakov Avinu, like Yaakov Avinu. In other words, Gam Yosef zacha la'amid shvatim. Yosef also, like Yaakov, gave birth to banim of the Jewish people, right? We have in this week's Parsha, Ephraim, Menashe, Keruven, V'Shimon, Yuli. So Ephraim and Menashe, the children of Yosef, were elevated to the status of Avot, right? Yosef, two children, right, were put on a par with their uncles, right, which is Menashe and Ephraim. Kimokain, Kishem Sheshloshes Avot, Tiknu Kol Echad Tefillah Mishlo. So what you see here is that Yosef, there's a certain sense of Yosef being an Av. He's an Av, right? As well as being a Ben. And just point out here, so you have that the Avot established three kinds of prayer for us, right? Avraham Shachris, Avraham initiated Tefillah Shachris, Yitzchak Mincha, and Yaakov Arvis, Mariv. Kach Yeshna Tefillah. There's another tefillah called Baalat Shem, another tefillah, Dumi L'Zeh Yosef. Allahu Tefillas Musaf. Tefillat Musaf. You see the word Yosef in Musaf. So there is something to Yosef being an Av, not just a Ben. So how do you become an Av, right? Bechinat Av Shel Yosef, what was each of the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, each of our Avot gave us something unique in the Masorah of Klal Yisrael. And he says like this, Bechinas Av Shel Yosef mitvateh gam be'avodah Hisharav. It also relates to what he accomplished, what he did. Gam Yosef Haya Harishon. Each one of them were firsts, as he's going to say, and Yosef also was a first. Kimuvan Mesuyam Benogeh Lehemshech Kiyumo Shel Klal Yisrael, in the ongoing development of Klal Yisrael. Avram Avinu Haya Hager Harishon. Avram Avinu was the first Jew of choice, the first ger, right? Yitzchak Avinu Haya Harishon Kishen Nolad Kiyehudi. Yitzchak was the first born Jew. V'Yakov Ze Harishon Shekol Tzetzaav Nechshavim Liyudim, that all of his children were Jewish, right? Rav Hutner said this in Yiddish. Avram is the erste Geborener, Yitzchak the erste Geborener, and Yaakov was the erste Gefallener. So you have a dramatic first, Avram Avinu, the first Jew by choice, the first Ger, Yitzchak the first born Jew, and Yaakov the first Jew who completely, it was a completion of Jewishness, that all of his children were Jews. What about, right, Yitzchak Avinu? So what about, no, Amnam. Next paragraph, Adayan Kayemet Derech Achat. There's another first that had to be contributed to the Netzach Yisrael of the Jewish people. The sheet was switched. Okay, yes. Something else. Chalila. Shelihinatech mehem Yehudi al yedei hitbollut. There's, after everything we've said, everything that contributed by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there was still a possibility of assimilation and the Jewish people to disappear from the world through hitbolalut, assimilation. Me'achar shahayel holech acharayim, child goes after its mother. Ubenisuin leisha nochriya, hofei chador haba, gam kein lenochri kamo imo. So if there's assimilation and a Jew marries a non-Jewish woman, that's the end of the Jewish people, right? Harishon shehitnaseh b'nisayon zeh, the first person who was confronted with this tragic end of Jewish history, Haya Yosef, Kedacha Nisyonot Hapitui Shel Eshet Potiphar, that he rejected the wife of Potiphar's advances, Ubekach Shamar al Toar Zaro, and by that act, he protected the purity of the Jewish people. Kimuvan Zeh, Yosef Haya Harishon. So this is Yosef's first. He was first. Shehera Sha'am Yisrael Yachol Lahamshich Ulishachrer Gam Biyuto Begola if he's Be'emsaut Shmira Al Kedushat HaMishpacha. That the Jewish people, there's a possibility. He gave the energy to the Jewish people that we can survive the assimilatory process, right? And as bad as things are, it is a promise, and we know how bad things are. We know, for example, in America, the intermarriage rate is beyond, and the assimilation, and what we're dealing with now, Baruch Hashem, there's a change of heart by many of the Jews on the left, Jews who have little connection to Torah are now, that many articles that are coming out, many events are happening where people are because of the events that are taking place, there's a change of heart. There's a seeking, a searching for the Ribono Shel Olam, right? And there's a reason for it. But first of all, let's just conclude what he's saying, that Yosef was not just a son, Yosef was also an Av, not just a Ben, he was an Av of Klal Yisrael, in the sense that he gave us a unique aspect of our Netzach Yisrael, of the eternal process of the Jewish people. Avram gave one thing, Yitzchak and Yaakov, and Yosef gave this spiritual energy that we can, as a people, we will withstand the assimilatory process. We will never be destroyed through it. Now, the Netziv, who we started out with today, has an essay on anti-Semitism. We're going back over 100 years, but the Netziv has an essay on anti-Semitism, which is printed at the end of his Pirush on Shir Hashirim. And also, it really, a lot of the stuff in there is mixed into his Pirush on Chumash and the Emek Dover and the Sefer that we were studying at the beginning. And he says like this: when things are so bad, really bad, that it looks like it's curtains for the Jewish people, that Yisrael has reached such a low level of observance and relationship to Bereshit base, right? The Rebbeinu Shalom has one final emergency maneuver that he takes out of his Otzer, and that's anti-Semitism. When things are so bad, that's when the Rebbeinu Shalom brings anti-Semitism. In a certain sense, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We see the words of the Netziv coming true in our time. Who would have believed, right? Those of us, the last one or two generations, since the Holocaust, since the Shoah, there's been, we have to understand it was a bleep on the radar screen. This was not really Jewish history, but things were good. We were building Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael. We were building Torah. We were establishing Chinuch. We were moving in a spiritual sense. But when the assimilatory process began, all of a sudden, who would have believed the anti-Semitism that we're dealing with now, right? Well, how does this happen? So we know how it happens. Halacha hi she'esav sona et Yaakov, right? We enjoyed a period of time after the Holocaust that we didn't feel it. I have another theory, by the way. The reason why the anti-Semitism was at a low ebb after the Holocaust was not because people changed their opinion necessarily, their hatred towards Yisrael, but it was an embarrassing time for someone after the Holocaust to come out and speak against the Jewish people, right? That's perhaps one approach to what we were going through. But we see now this return to Halachi Hisheis of Sonas Yaakov, and it's for our good that this is what is in effect having an effect on many thousands of Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. We're seeing a tremendous return to Ruchnius, to spirituality, and we're seeing it in Chutz La'aretz too. And it's a moment that we have to seize ourselves in reaching out, each in our own way, to our friends and our neighbors. There are all kinds of things going on that we could participate in. So this is really the last paragraph. Rav Hutner writes, Nimsa she Yosef nechshav mimutzeh ben dargat av dargat ben. He is kind of a bridge between a father and a son, between the door of avot and the door of banim, right? That's why, and that answers the question, why the death of Yosef is recorded in Sefer Shmos and in Sefer Bereshis, because it was the death of someone who not only was the son generation, but also was an Av and gave us a sense of Avhut, of fatherhood, and with that spiritual energy that we will continue to survive. The Rebbeinu Shalom will not forsake Am Yisrael, as bad as it might appear right now. We have to turn to Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbos for our strengthening, Tehillim and davening and learning, and of course all of the Chesed that we have to continue to do on behalf of Am Yisrael, our holy soldiers, our Chayalim Kadoshim, and the hostages. So much to be done, but each and every one of us has to see ourselves not as simple, who am I, but the tefillahs, the Torah, the Chesed that we can do will bring about a change. Okay? So thank you all. I speak, I guess, on behalf of everyone who has been presenting the Chizuk Shiurim in the last few months. This is the end, and the OU will be open next week. The regular shiur will begin. This particular shiur for the Parsha will continue at 10:45 next Thursday. Thank you all for your patience. Have a Shabbat Shalom to everybody, and thank you, Chana, for your dedication